Hello, people that are mostly made of water, so you probably shouldn't be too proud of yourself. I am Patrick Smith. This is Disenthrall. Today I have my partner in victimless crime with me, Kaysen. What are you doing? What are you wearing? What's happening?
I'm gearing up for the school shooting.
What?
You didn't get the memo? There's a school shooter.
You can't joke about that stuff, man.
You got to gear up for that.
Okay.
No, I'm not joking about it because that's a story I want to talk about because there's some serious bullshit floating around the internet.
Oh.
The internet. And I want to dispel some of this nonsense. Shall I just go from here?
I think you should.
And try to pull this thing out of a nosedive?
Execute that. Oh, I can't say. Oh, that's a bad word to use in the story.
Probably
do that.
Don't want to say execute.
Begin the story.
Watch this. Watch this.
Watching.
The more experience you have, the better your chances of survival are. So this allows you to practice and have multiple experiences, know what works, what doesn't work.
Okay, my first thought with this was like a video game where you get to play as a school shooter, which might be the most offensive thing I've ever heard of in my entire life.
Yeah, so this is created by the Department of Homeland Security to help teachers, staff, parents, whoever is going to purchase the software, prepare for a school shooting. And I disagree with some of their methods. Like, I like the intention, but I disagree with some of their methods. I'll let you see what else is going on.
So it's like simulation for training purposes.
Yeah, it is like it's like a school shooting simulator.
All right.
We have an active shooter who's arrived on the scene of a school. He can't get in.
He can't get in. He can't get in. I cannot think of a person who, if they want to get into a school, can't bust out some windows, can't break some locks, or just walk through the open doors. Like my high school, where I went to school, all the doors were unlocked. You were supposed to check in at the office, but...
So he's interacting with the environment. He's shooting the doors out.
Interesting statistic, 1/4 of mass shootings have occurred on school premises.
We sat with the mother of a child that died at Sandy Hook.
That's impossible.
And she walked through the entire event, incident by incident, explaining it all to us. She was able to separate herself and technically tell us exactly what happened so that we could emulate that in the virtual environment.
So something that kind of confused me here was I was wondering if the mother of the child who was involved at Sandy Hook was actually present. Maybe she's a teacher or something, but that's not quite clear either in the article or in the video. So I guess that one we'll just chalk up to not sure. But if she wasn't involved, I'd be curious to know how she was able to develop a simulation. So Homeland Security says that the simulation should be ready to launch by spring 2018. It is now summer of 2018.
Uh-oh.
And we'll find out if it's out right after this video. Let's finish off the video, and then we can talk about where it's at in its current stage of development.
I think
just something to point out.
I think we know.
With teachers, they did not self-select into a role that they expect to have bullets flying near them. That's something that they did not choose as their career. Unfortunately, it's becoming a reality, and so we want to give them that chance to understand what options are available to them and what might work well for them. So
what confuses me is there's a lot of talk about different defensive measures to be put in at schools. I've seen in the media lately more metal detectors. Okay, I've seen now the not virtual reality, the simulation game of so you know what to do, where to go, how people behave, that sort of thing. Okay, but one thing I haven't seen anybody really talking about, in fact, I've seen the exact opposite of this, is people coming in with firearms to protect you from somebody with a gun. I'm really confused as to why people think that guns have no place on a school. They have no place on a school in the hands of an aggressor, but in the hands of somebody who's going to protect and defend your child, they absolutely have a place there. What's your take on all that?
Yeah, you're right. It's a huge blind spot because all guns are bad, right? And all gun laws protect us, right? It's a fundamental understanding of what a gun is. A gun is a tool that someone can use to be a force multiplier, a force amplifier. It's the ultimate equalizer. It allows a 6-year-old little boy to be on defensive equal footing with a 25-year-old, huge built wrestling bodybuilder attacker. It is merely a tool that exhibits upon the world what its wielder wants. And if that wielder wants to defend the innocent lives around them, then that's what that gun will do. And if that gun is being wielded to injure the innocent people around them, then that is what that gun will do. It has nothing to do with the guns. And the gun laws, literally, every time this happens, literally, I think people are, maybe even the left is starting to realize that gun-free zones don't actually stop guns. In fact, it seems to attract them. As it said, how many? Half?
1/4, 25%.
A fourth of all shootings happen in schools, or yeah, that's just schools, not even gun-free zones in general.
Schools.
So if you have a defensive pool of victims and you have a guy with this force amplifier called a gun, then there's going to be a whole lot more victims. Whereas if you had the thing that allows you to stand on equal footing with anyone, maybe even better footing because you actually have training in a defensive situation, training for the purposes explicitly of defending a school, then you're going to have an advantage over vile, evil men like this. So yeah, it's a huge blind spot.
And I think they don't recognize the inconsistency of saying, I don't want people to have guns. When problems occur, I will call the police, who are men with guns, to come and protect me.
Yeah. Yeah, guns when wielded by the police are good. Yeah, exactly. The other thing I wanted to point out is that people also seem to forget that, or never realize, that the schools exist coercively. The children exist in those schools coercively. In that way, the schools are sort of like a prison environment. And when you trap a bunch of humans in a box, they're going to misbehave. They're going to behave poorly sometimes. And they're going to, the people that are already the edge cases, the people that are already mentally not there well, when you put those types of semi-damaged or reduced capacity for empathy minds in a prison type scenario, you're going to sort of extract or encourage, not encourage, but elicit or pull out of them more extreme behaviors that might not have been there had they been in a voluntary situation where they weren't being forced into a situation where they are required to wake up every day and go and subject themselves to bullying and other people treating them poorly, or the stupidity of the teenage social hierarchy. That will drive an already unstable or already not all there person to this crazy stuff. So my point is, the very nature of the school entity itself attracts this stuff, attracts these people because it's coercive. That I don't think gets talked about enough.
And on that same note, because it's coercive not only for the people who are turning into perpetrators or attackers, but also it's forced on those who may not want to be there, and they're also being turned into victims. Right? So
yeah.
Somebody doesn't want to go to school that day, and then there's a school shooting. Can you imagine the kind of emotional trauma that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their lives? Because, man, I really should have stayed home. Man, I really should have stayed home. I wouldn't have gone through that.
If they even survive. If they survive. Can you, look at the chain of ethics involved. If you force someone to go to a location and you do not allow them to leave on pain of up to and including deadly force if you resist far enough, if you resist the fines which lead to prison, which if you resist the abduction to go to prison lead to, guns in your face from police.
You're going to have to slow that one down for anybody who's not like a full-blown anarchist.
You're right. So
you're going to have to slow that way down.
There's a gun.
Patrick, you just said, wait. You just said, I'm going to play this back for you, and you decode this however you want.
Yeah.
Whenever people go to school, they are there by force, by deadly force.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
There's a law behind every gun. No, excuse me. There is a gun behind every law. Meaning, if you break a law, the eventual result of that, if you resist that law control far enough, is a gun pointed at your face. Here's how it goes down. We, for the good of our children, want to make sure that everybody gets an education in our society. So we make a law that requires you to have your, which feels good, right? So we make a law that requires that the parents, good parents, of course, what good parent wouldn't want their kid to be educated? So we're going to make a law that just requires that the parents get their kids educated. And so they got to go to school, but it's okay. It's not a bad thing because we're giving them free school. So it's not like we're forcing them to pay for something. We're providing it as a public free service to the people. So, but you have to, if you don't like our public schools, you have the freedom to go and use private school, but you have to educate your kids. If you're not, you're an abusive parent. That's a bad thing to do. So we're going to require, because we're good and we're a good society and we want to do good. We are going to require that you put your kids in public school. So that creates a law. Laws that don't have punishments attached can barely even be considered laws because they're unenforceable. Or, that's an important word, what I just said. When you think of a law as being enforced or an enforceable law, the word force is in there. Force. What do you think the force is? Is it a request? Is it a piece of paper that says do this or you got to pay us some money? That's still not really even force. It's what happens if you don't. Well, then they demand that you show up in court on another piece of paper, right? So you got to keep your kids in school. Oh, we see here, sir, that your kid hasn't shown up to school this year, or you haven't enrolled your kid to school yet this year, or you stopped making them go every day 2 months ago. Well, that's called truancy, and you're being a bad parent. And so for the safety of your kids, we're going to make sure that you get your kids in school. And because you haven't, well, you need to show up to this administrative hearing where we're going to talk it over with you. And, oh, okay, a week later. Sorry, you missed your appointment. You didn't show up to the administrative hearing. So now we, have to escalate situations. We're going to ask that you pay, a $250 fine and get your kid back in school and comply immediately. A few weeks later. You didn't pay your fine. That was a court-administered fine. You're required to pay it by law. Now you have a court date. So here's your court date. Show up to court by this day and time, and we will, have your hearing. And the court hearing date comes and goes because you are resisting, because you own yourself and should be able to self-direct what you do and what you do with your children. You're continuing to resist. You don't show up to court. Okay, now we're gonna have to issue a warrant for your arrest because you failed to appear. So now there's a warrant for your arrest for failure to appear for your court date. You continue to not appear. A police officer either comes to your door, which is the likely scenario in this, if not, a CPS person accompanied by a police. I don't know how we're going full into this, the enforceability of the law, right? This all stems.
This is important. This is very important.
This all stems from that. We want to be good citizens and make sure our children are educated. So now the cops show up and, sorry, we got to arrest you because you didn't show up to the court date. Note that they're not, in the police's mind, they're arresting you because they're doing their job because you've had a failure to appear. They're not associating the ethics of the situation. You're trying to maintain agency and control of your life and make decisions in the interest of your children the way you want them to in the best possible way you can for your children. In the cops' mind, they're not thinking, "Oh, I'm going to arrest you because you're making decisions for yourself and not agreeing with how the law wants you to treat your kids." In their mind, you failed to appear.
By law, they mean the majority of people, right?
Yes.
Where it's just like, yeah, you need to do this. Yeah.
Yeah. So they try and arrest you. If you continue to resist, this is the point. If you continue to stand up for your rights, for your right to exist free of coercion, they will escalate as far as it takes until you're either dead or you submit. And it comes to a head at the warrant stage. The cops show up, they're taking you to jail. Do you resist? If not, if you resist the police, you know what happens. They will escalate until they either have you unconscious on the ground, potentially bleeding to death, or if you resist hard enough with guns, they will shoot back and you will most likely end up dead. That is the entire chain of events from a helpful law, good for the society, to just make sure that people are good parents and get their kids educated, ends with a gun backing it. All laws have a gun backing them up. All laws are force. And if they aren't enforceable, if they don't have a penalty behind them at all, then they're not really laws. They're not really enforceable.
I think a lot of people skid over that. They don't want to confront that. So thank you for taking it from the beginning. So now if anybody ever says, you can't prove that, then I'll just refer them to this video and we never have to say it again. Hooray!
Yes. So the point of all that was to point out the chain of ethics. If there's a school shooting and a child gets injured or killed, who is responsible for that? Certainly the shooter. Absolutely. I don't think, no one's arguing it's not the shooter. Who else is responsible? Who forced them to be in that a fish in that barrel? Who initiated force in that situation first to set up that child to be killed, to be a fish in that barrel? Anybody who voted for that law, anybody who tried to get that law into existence, anybody who enforces that law has a share, has a hand in that death because they forced that kid to exist in that barrel. I think that is another thing that gets missed in these, and that was my point.
Absolutely, and people don't even think of earlier whenever you're going through the entire chain of how it has violence behind it. You mentioned it's a free service. That's what people say, but it's not a free service. I live in the city that I live in, and a big chunk of change that I make every year goes to pay for the school district that I graduated from, because I live in the same area where I graduated from school. I did not want to go to that school. I still wish I had not gone to that school. I had not had those experiences there. But yet I will pay that under penalty of death. I think that's just like one of the most corrupt things that anybody could do to somebody. To say, we're going to force you to pay for your own imprisonment, as it were, in some of the most creative and what should be the most fun times in one's life. You know?
And it's even more vile in that it's visited upon the children.
It's so immoral. So they're trying to do something right. I would say trying to prevent school shootings is right. I would go further back and say make schools voluntary, because then you can pick the security package that you want to have for your kids if you're going to send them to school, or you can keep them at home and don't have any laws forcing people to do that. But while they're trying to do this, Homeland Security, they're still working on the Enhanced Dynamic Geosocial Environment, or EDGE. It's a multiplayer, scalable online training environment for first responders and now for schools. The second EDGE environment will be available in summer 2018 to first respond. Now, they've kept moving the date back because originally it was in spring. Now it's in summer. Summer is almost coming to a head. So I don't know if it's actually going to come out. In the meantime,
spoiler.
Other people are releasing video games all the time. Yeah, go ahead.
Spoiler alert, government sucks at everything, including software design.
So the people who are in charge of the Homeland Security, you know, aptly named the Department of Homeland Security, this is a big, big issue, and their solution is still not ready to go. Like, what the heck? But they say it's their solution. They say it's their way to help people prepare and respond and be prepared for the worst. And they're still dragging their feet and not able to put it out fast enough.
Well, what's going to protect
even for
people,
the stuff that they say, this is our solution?
What's going to protect you more? Of your teachers all having played a video game, or a couple people on the fucking premises being armed?
Probably the latter option. You know, if I had to venture a guess.
I've played a lot of shooter video games. But it's still not equal to actually having a pistol on me and practice with it.
Right now, like, who looks more tactical right now, Patrick? You or me?
Who has a gun on them right now, you or me?
That's the real question that should be being asked, right?
Exactly.
Because only one of us is likely to survive if somebody busts through the window right now. And it's not me.
Well, thanks for bringing that story up. It definitely turned into a much longer discussion on some really important concepts behind how laws work in the world.